We're going to go ahead and get started. You are at the Stop LAPD Spying Coalition regularly scheduled Tuesday meetings. We host these meetings the first 4 Tuesdays of the month because I never say all the Tuesdays because sometimes we have a fifth and we're not always there. So this is the 4th Tuesday of the month, 6 p.m. And we are the group that's studying data-driven policing and all the surveillance technologies and different mapping technologies that go along with that. Before I get started, I'm just going to pass to Hamid real quick, and he's just going to give you a little bit of our logistics and how we work on Zoom.
Hey everybody, good to see folks over here. This is our Power Not Paranoia webinar series, part 32. We started doing these webinars on March 20th or March 17th, and gosh, 7 months later, we had done that hoping that it's only going to be for a couple of weeks, and then we'll be back to in our in-person meetings in Skid Row with our family out in Skid Row and also at LA Can. But here we are. So also trying to just make sure that we maintain the integrity of the space. So real quick logistically, but one that we're going to be recording this meeting. So this is going to be uploaded on the website, stoplapdspying.org, and I'll post that in chat. And you can see the previous 31 webinars on the website as well. And then secondly, when you all came in, you were muted, and there's a reason for that, that we have had our experience with the Zoom bombing and some pretty foul language and stuff like that. But don't want to silence people, don't want to police people's thoughts or comments. So if you want to make a comment or a question or something, please either put it in chat, or there's a raise your hand option as well. And then as far as a chat is concerned, we've also had unfortunately, our experiences with chat too. So that's been a problem that we had to deal with. So the chat's going to be just to myself and the co-hosts. And that's where we're going to be going. So with that, I'm going to be passing it back to Jamie.
All right. So, hey, everyone. So I thought, you know what? There's such a small group of us here. I'm going to open it up for introductions for everyone, if you feel comfortable. Okay. So for those of you who can, if you can, after you say your name, pronouns, if you're within an organization, if not, what brings you to the table. Be mindful, not too long. There is still 18 of us here, so I don't want the intro to take too long, but it's a nice small group, so I thought I'd do this. Reminds me of being back at home, organizing on the ground and not having to do it through Zoom. So just be mindful of time and space that we're taking. That's the only thing I ask. Okay, so I'll model. My name is Jamie. I use she, her. I've been organizing with the Stop LAPD Spying Coalition for 9 years. I help facilitate this data-informed, data-driven policing working group. So happy to be here. Thank you. And I'll pass to Lauren.
Hi, everyone. Good evening. My name is Lauren. She, her pronouns, please. I've been part of the data-informed policing working group through Stop LAPD Spying for about almost 2 years now. So happy to be here and see you all. I will pass it. Can I pass it? Is that how?
Sure, I'll just go ahead and unmute, and folks will have to unmute themselves.
Okay.
So you can pass it to whoever. I can.
Amy, would you like to go? I see you're on video.
Go ahead, Amy.
Sorry, I just stepped away for a second, so I actually missed the instructions.
Sorry.
So we're just doing, or you will go ahead, Lauren.
Yeah, we're just doing introductions. So if you want to just introduce yourself, pronouns, what orgs you're part of, and what brings you here today.
Yes. Amy Ritterbush, she, her pronouns. I'm an assistant professor at UCLA in the Department of Social Welfare, along with Victoria, who's also on, and other folks that you might know. I'm also part of the Cops Off Campus statewide organizing group. faculty-wide known as UCFTP, and Cops Off Campus more generally. We're kind of organizing at the faculty level with students. Yeah, and I was just about to type in the chat to Hamid, like, this space makes my week better always. And so I come here to try to like stay grounded in movement space and learn from all of you amazing organizers in LA. I'm actually new to Los Angeles. I came from doing this work in Colombia. So yeah, I'm just really grateful for this space.
You want to pass it on to someone?
Sure, yes. I will pass it to Victoria.
Victoria, if you want to unmute,
Yeah.
go ahead.
Okay. Hi, everyone. I'm Victoria. I'm a PhD. Oh, sorry. Like having technical difficulties. I'm a PhD student at UCLA in social welfare. I am currently part of Cops Off Campus as well. I also am part of Let's Get Free LA Coalition here in LA. And more recently, I'm trying to start working with Stop LAPD Spying on some child welfare research and things like that. So I'm super excited. I love this space, and I'm super grateful for everyone who's teaching me so much always.
You pass it on to someone? Go ahead, you can unmute.
Sorry. I'll pass it to Andrew.
Andrew, let me see. Give me 1 second, Andrew. Let me find you. Go ahead, Andrew. You can unmute.
Thanks, Victoria. I'm Andrew. I'm, I don't know. Okay, so I've been working on police and prison abolition for, I don't know, 15 years or something. My day job is as a professor of media history and theory at Cal Arts. And I'm happy to announce that Jeremy Hammond is the anarchist hacker who's been in prison for almost a decade now, is going to be getting out in less than a month. And so really excited to hear that. I'll pass it on to Rick.
Rick, give me 1 second, Rick. Go ahead, Rick. Try to unmute. There you go.
Okay. Can you guys hear me?
Yes, please.
Hi, my name is Rick Newell. I'm just relocating from Phoenix, Arizona. And I grew up in a family of dissenters. My mom was definitely an advocate. So I grew up around this. I'm just starting to get active later on in my life. So I guess you can call me a new member, and really trying to get an idea and a feel of the group, find out exactly what's the objective, and to actually learn a little bit more about what's your purpose.
Thank you. Thank you. Do you want to pass it on to somebody?
Meryl?
Okay, let me just, yeah, there you go. Oops. There you go, Meryl. Go ahead and unmute. So.
Hey y'all, how are you doing?
Good,
I'm
good.
Meral. I'm a legal fellow with Project South. I'm technically working out of Atlanta, but I'm based in Arizona currently due to COVID. I'm just here to learn more about all the work y'all are doing and kind of possibly see if other people are interested in working with us in the South. And also just to hear more about data-driven policing from all these amazing people on the call. Thank you.
Want to pass it on?
We pass it on to Leah.
Hey everyone. Someone? Okay.
You got it.
Hey all. My name's Leah, they them pronouns, and I've been working with the coalition for a couple years on a bunch of different stuff, and I'm also a PhD student studying smart cities and surveillance. And I can pass it on to Ariana.
Okay, Ari, go ahead and unmute.
Hi, sorry, I just joined.
We're just doing introductions, Ari.
Oh, okay.
And you are, if you're with an org, or what brings you here?
Oh, sure. My name is Ari. I'm not part of an organization, but I used to I used to be a part of the coalition a while back, but I'm just getting back in, and I'm supporting Chella. Also, she invited me, personally to come in and check it out. So I'm here. Hi, and it's good to be here.
Awesome. You want to pass it on to someone?
Sure. Let's go with Elizabeth.
Okay, cool. Elizabeth, go ahead and unmute if you can, please.
Hi, my name's Elizabeth. I'm currently an undergrad at UCLA, the School of Public Affairs. I'm taking a social movements class right now, and we were asked to participate in something relating to social movements. So I'm just here to learn and listen to everybody.
Great.
And then can you pass to someone, Elizabeth?
Yes, Eileen.
Okay. Eileen, go ahead and unmute.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for having me. My name is Eileen, she, her, hers. I am an undergraduate at Pomona College, and I recently came across Stop LAPD Spying Coalition, so this is very new to me, and I just wanted to learn more about the organization and the amazing work y'all are doing, so thank you for this space.
Cool.
Oh, and I will pass it to Michael Nishimura.
This is almost like a mem.
This is gonna be our last
test.
one, because we're gonna do one more, and then if everyone else can just introduce themselves in the chat, because we are definitely filling up, and I'd love to get our conversation started. But this was a really great way to warm each other up into feeling comfortable in the room and in the space. So I might do this more often. But go ahead, take it away, Michael. The rest of you, please introduce yourself in the chat so we know who you are.
Thanks, Jamie. Thanks, Ahmed. Yes, my name is Michael, he, him pronouns. I work for the Bell Project in Los Angeles, and I'm also a PhD student at UCSB in sociology. And yeah, thanks for letting me be the last one. I'll hand it back to the hosts.
Awesome. Okay, everybody, thank you so much for just doing that, and for, showing your faces, letting folks know who you are. And for the rest of you, maybe Ryan, we can get off the screen. For the rest of you, I just really appreciate you being here and being present and ready to dive into what we call data-driven policing. So just to give an intro to what this working group is that we meet every Monday, first Monday and the third Mondays of the month. That's the working group meeting, right? This Tuesday, fourth Tuesday, and I know this gets confusing, it's almost like you need a roadmap, but the fourth Tuesday of the month is where we basically come to folks who are not kind of in the working group, intimately involved with the work yet, and kind of show you what we're doing. And still have those same conversations. But the first Monday and the third Monday is where we really get into the nitty-gritty, and we start to build out our ideas and figure out where we want to take things and start working out those details. And even from those working groups, we break up into smaller working groups. So there's a couple projects that we're working on. And before I dive into each of those projects, I wanted to kind of explain what they are. So our first Monday, we look at housing, and we look at housing, not so much housing, but we look at what we're calling land and policing. And we have been able to acquire maps that we got from a public records request around two predictive policing programs, which are now kind of termed data-driven policing programs, called Operation Laser and PredPol. And so that working group is looking at those maps and kind of interpreting them and seeing what we can kind of derive from these maps that we acquired. They're actually mission sheets from LAPD. So that's the first meeting. We look at land and policing. The third Monday of the month, we look more at this new policing program called Data Informed Community Focused Policing. And this is a new program that LAPD rolled out. So what is kind of like the origins of this working group, right? And that's a big important part of this story, because this working group didn't just kind of start up because of data-informed community-focused policing, this new kind of data-driven predictive policing program that LAPD has. We originally had come together around predictive policing. And that's why I keep using those terms interchangeably, because they're pretty much the same thing. Just one, they're trying to make people less afraid of, and that's the data driven, because you're not too afraid. Well, if it's data driven, it's scientific, it's objective, it's math, so it's got to be right. Predictive policing, you'd be a little more suspicious, because you're like, well, who's going to predict that I'm going to do something? You can't predict things, right? So that's not right. And that's kind of how LAPD saw our initial protest and our initial objection and cries for them to stop these kinds of programmings. And we outed them. So the first kind of coming together around data-driven policing was the fight against predictive policing. And that began in 2016 against Operation LA Strategic Extraction and Restoration, a person and place-based predictive policing program, and PredPol, a location-based predictive policing program that was using an algorithm to predict where crime would happen, right? So the fight began back in 2016, and this group essentially filed a plethora of public records requests to obtain documents from LAPD. And we wrote community-based reports about PredPol, about algorithmic policing, about, person-based policing, or what's also called offender-based policing, or and so we wrote about these styles of policing. You had location, where they were trying to predict where crime would be. You had person, where they were trying to predict who was committing it. So we also did focus groups to learn what the community actually thought about police being able to predict crime, if that was even possible. And we also went to the Los Angeles Board of Police Commissioners every Tuesday, raising issues about all the different types of equipment LAPD was using to run predictive policing programs. And a lot of this was all various types of surveillance equipment. So, so we were doing that, and then and kind of building power, like here, except we were located in Skid Row at Los Angeles Community Action Network, and that's where we were having our meetings, and we were creating popular education, we were creating pamphlets, we were having workshops, and we were just making it more and more apparent to the community what predictive policing was. So we, by 2018, we filed a lawsuit against LAPD. We sued them because they wouldn't fulfill a public records request that we filed against the program Operation Laser, which is the person and place-based predictive policing program. So we filed lawsuit on them there, and we were asking for everything, right? Maps, everything. And we even wanted to know who was in the database that were targeted as people. Remember, I told you the predictive component against people, and they were deeming them chronic offenders. And so they were creating chronic offender bulletins, and they were creating a database. So in our public records request, we said, we even want to know who's in the database. So we filed public records request, or I'm sorry, filed lawsuit February 2018. In May of 2018, we released the report Before the Bullet Hits the Body, which Hamid linked in the chat. And then by July of 2018, we forced the Los Angeles Board of Police Commissioners into the first national hearing about data-driven policing. A month later, unbeknownst to us and with no announcement from LAPD, they suspend the person-based policing program that were calling people chronic offenders, that predictive component of Laser. They suspend that program. By the next year, we go to LA again, or we go back to the police commission, because we're going, every month, and they're reviewing, they're doing their next review on looking at Laser. And so we go back and they actually suspend the program completely. So by April of 2019, Laser suspended completely. The whole time we're building power against Predpol. There's a lot of students here on this webinar right now. We built very strongly with UCLA Anthropology Department and several folks on that campus. And we filled the Board of Police Commissioners meetings with students, faculty, and basically, calling out Jeff Brantingham, the co-creator of Predpol, the algorithm that drives the location-based policing. And we effectively dismantled Predpol and stopped the department from using it. And I believe it was March of 2020 or April of 2020. It was March or April of 2020. And so no longer is LAPD using Operation Laser or Predpol. And that is where we are at now, because what they've launched now is called data-informed, community-focused policing. And so now we realize our work hasn't ended, right? They obviously suspended the 2 programs they created, but now they're trying to recreate the programs in a way that makes it look like it's more data-driven, right? That it's more precise, it's uniformly used across all the divisions, that it is more accurate, that there's going to be more oversight. And because I think the key takeaways from the fight that we had is not only are we an abolitionist organization and we don't think they should be using any of these programs at all, but what we found out is that they were arbitrarily marking locations as, predictive hotspots. They were arbitrarily putting people on lists saying that they believed these people were going to commit crimes. So what we ended up seeing was just, the same old policing that you always see, right? Harassment of Black and brown and poor people. So, so here we are with data-informed community-focused policing. And so I want to take folks through a handbook that they actually created in response to us, because they thought that that's what we wanted, that we wanted a handbook that, that basically explained what the programs were, which, it just kind of explains what the violence is. It doesn't really kind of make you feel any better about it. But I want to take us through it a little bit, because the working group right now, some of our main objectives right now when we meet on the 3rd Monday in that working groups, that's a part of this webinar, but then we break up into the working groups. So the 3rd Monday of the month, the data-driven folks kind of look at this data-informed community-focused policing program. And we have at this point broken it up into 3 sections, because the name is enough to say, right? I mean, how do you go out and outreach and talk to people and say, hey, do you want to know about data-informed community-focused policing? And it's like, it doesn't even roll off the tongue of your mouth or roll off the tongue very easily at all. So we felt like, how do we get people to understand what this programming is? And there's 3 components that we see. Offender-based policing, which hasn't gone away, right? This is how they predict who's going to do something. Location-based policing, which hasn't gone away, which is where they predict crime is going to be. And community policing. That's been the kind of glove that they've put over the iron fist. And so I'm going to screen share right now and take us through a little bit of the location-based policing. Give me 2 seconds. I need to make sure I have it up. And let's see, there we go. And then let me come back here. Let's see. Sorry, real quick, folks, just doing some tech stuff. So let me go ahead and show everybody a little bit of data-informed community-focused policing. So don't get dizzy. I'm going to take you up to the top. Okay, so this handbook came out. It was so funny. I think it was 4/20 of 2019. Was it 4/20 of 2019, Hamid, that this handbook? No, it was 4/20.
4/20/20.
Yeah, 4/20/20. I just remember 4/20, and I just thought it was so hilarious.
Well, it was 4/20. That's why one doesn't forget. So.
So this is their handbook, data-informed community-focused policing. So the working group that is focusing primarily on this, like I said, wants to start to kind of explain what this programming is through these 3 methods. So I'm going to start first with offender-based policing. And so I'm going to take us to page 23. So don't get dizzy. Here I go again. We're going to go down just a little bit. I'm going to explain what offender-based policing is, which I'm sure by the name, everybody kind of gets it already. It's the offender that they want to police, correct? I mean, it's not too difficult, but they definitely try to make it into a science. But I think there's some key things that we really need to think about. And then there's some folks that work on bail that are here that I think would be interested in kind of seeing how people who are on parole, probation, and community supervision actually are the main targets of this type of policing. Though, when you look at current stop data, which we're going to be kind of facilitating a group conversation later on around stop data, you'll see that, you know, folks are getting stopped for traffic stops and violations, you know, at disparate impacts, disproportionate rates, I mean, and they're basically for, you know, license plate registration, tinted windows. And so we know how all that goes. But there's a big portion of people that also are tracked because they're on parole, probation, or community supervision. And they're claiming that this offender-based component of the program is all to track, go after people who have been just released, right? And this is taking the place of what was existed in the LASER program, and which was known as the chronic offender, right? They used to use a risk assessment. So if you would basically earn a bunch of points for various types of contact with law enforcement, and then the person with the highest points would be the chronic offender that, you know, Metro or the gang enforcement detail would monitor. But now they are claiming that they're not going to have any responsibility in selecting who the chronic offender is, that it's going to be told from them to them by people who are on parole, probation, or post-release. Or then there's always the caveat that they'll go after people also if they fit the description, right? Because what they're trying to do is start to legitimize police, how do you say it, like police intelligence. We're starting to get academic papers that are actually legitimizing that police have a certain form of intelligence that they get from the streets, and that should be considered as well as any other data point as being kind of objective and contributing to the solving of crimes, right? Which just means subjectiveness and racism in regular terms. So with offender-based policing, here on 23, you'll see, and I'm going to move us down to page 24, because I want to give an example of how this offender-based policing works, and they're very candid when they talk about it. So over here on the left upper corner, they say, for an example, an area is how they describe divisions now, right? There's 21 divisions in LAPD. An area is experiencing a surge in motor vehicle thefts. Should consider identifying individuals with residences or last known addresses in that area / division who have underlying convictions for vehicle code sections, you know, whatever penal code it is for motor vehicle theft, conducting specific timely probation and parole checks on these individuals is likely to provide the greatest likelihood of desisting future reoffending. So you're on parole and probation, and there happens to be car break-ins in your neighborhood. LAPD is saying, we're going to come visit you and shake you down because we think that you may have been the one to do it, or we're just reminding you to not do it. So these are the way that our most vulnerable folks end up getting harassed and re-harassed by LAPD, even after, you know, being released from a cage. And this is how they're kind of seen within the system. The main change up here from, like I said, from the chronic offender is that LAPD is depending now on the county to provide these lists to them so that they can claim like, we're not doing anything, but they always still leave the caveat that that they, you know, if you fit the description, they still have the right to kind of go after you, right? So offender-based policing is really nothing new. They've just, you know, have kept this going from doing it not as like a risk assessment or a risk-based component. So the next component that we want to talk about is location-based. Now, location-based consists of, it's up here on page 20, and you can get this handbook online. All you have to do is type data-informed, community-focused policing, and you'll get the handbook will pop up right online. So the next component is location-based policing, where they really focus on micro hotspots. But within that micro hotspot, right, so in the micro hotspots, and I should say around the micro hotspots, they set up kind of like a terrain to be able to kind of continue this kind of operations of stalking, of being within the area, and making it convenient to like to move through that area easily, right? So and to get information that they need to like accomplish their surveillance of that area. So not only do they have the micro hotspots, which they feel like crime is happening in that area, and they use a plethora of different kind of like mapping technologies, ArcGIS, they use CompStat. So they use, various kinds of ways to break up say they're just looking at a certain division, to break up the division, to find out like where is the concentrations of crime, right? And we all know that crime is concentrated where police are. So if police are there, they create crime because they find crime. So you don't see police over, on the west side or over in Wall Street, because if they did, they would find all this crime, but we find them so the point being is like where they go, they can document crime and get data. So when we think about location-based policing, there's all these micro hotspots, right? The concentration of crime, whether it's break-ins, assaults, guns, or any of that kind of crime happening. But they also, within these locations, they have something that's called the ACCIC. And I'm going to move us over just a little bit to the right and up here, because these three things I want to talk about a little bit, because I think they're really important. And they're some of the things that is most fascinating with me about how they're setting up their operations. So the ACCICs are called the Area Crime Community Intelligence Centers, right? Where they basically, all the data that LAPD is gathering on us, either through electronic surveillance, through cops on the beat, all kind of within a division, all get funneled into your ACCIC. And this picture up here on the left is pretty much real time what's going on. So they're hanging out in the ACCICs and they're getting real time mapping, because when you realize that when cops are out on the beat, they have a device that allows them to, like, say they card you and they use a field interview card, that information from the field interview card will automatically get uploaded into like an ACCIC, and they will process that information in real time. A cop takes down a crime report, they will send that electronically, and charts and maps get updated in real time. So they have real-time mapping, and then they have the maps that come out like for CompStat, which are 30 days later, or they have, maybe every 12 hours they give out maps to officers. But the big thing is that they have this real-time mapping, right? And your area crime community intelligence centers, there's 21 of them now throughout the city of LA, right? So these little hubs. So on top of that, they have even bigger hubs, which are community safety operations centers. Now, those are even bigger real-time kind of wars-like situation rooms. And they have those ones per bureau. So there's 4 CSOCs, and they operate similarly, where they are areas where data comes in, data gets processed, data gets analyzed, and then it gets shared back into the field, into the various special operations or patrol that they have in your community. So I think when we think about location-based policing, we can't just be thinking about the hotspots it creates, but we need to be thinking about the landscape that it's creating and how they're setting up their operations in our community, right? And if for some of you who know maybe a little bit more about surveillance, The ACCICs and the CSOCs should be making you think of fusion centers, because fusion centers are huge data warehouses that combine multiple intelligence agencies in one kind of building or one space that's processing massive amounts of data, with the Joint Terrorism Task Force analyzing this data, shooting it out and sharing it with multiple people. So they're basically taking that like federal kind of, how do you say it, the federal layout, and they're bringing it to the local community. So down into if you are in Boyle Heights, the division you are in is basically, or area is Hollenbeck, and Hollenbeck has its own ACCIC that basically collects data, analyzes data, stores that data, and shares that data. So, so that's kind of a component of the location-based policing. And the last little section that I'll talk about in location-based policing, and what I kind of didn't mention when I kept mentioning the micro hotspots, is that they're calling them neighborhood engagement areas. And in the neighborhood engagement areas is where they send the senior lead officers to start to build relationships with stakeholders. And this is kind of how you start to get that infiltration of community policing coming in, right? Now we're going to talk about not only just how they, who they're tracking, how they're setting up their landscape, but then how they're starting to set up their relationships. And the neighborhood engagement areas are really selected by LAPD. They claim they do the scanning analysis of the area to find out, like, is there abandoned vehicles? Is there, prostitution going on? Are there abandoned houses? Are there squatters? Are there, houseless folks sleeping out in a certain part of the area? And then they'll decide if they need to engage that area more. But when we get into community policing, that's where we get to find out who do they really consider to be their stakeholders, right? So don't get dizzy again. I'm going to take you down to, or maybe I'm going to take you back up because I always get confused. Here it is. Okay. So who do they consider to be their stakeholders? Because remember, I was saying there's three parts to data-informed community-focused policing. There's the people they're going after, right? And they're not taking any responsibility from it. They're just saying, oh, we're getting all that info from the county. We're just doing probation, parole checks, and we're just monitoring them. Then they're setting up their landscape for location-based policing, honing in on these micro hotspots, but making sure they have all their equipment laid out and their stations laid out so that they can share all this information. But then when they hone in that micro hotspot, they want to make friends now, right? And they want to, put that glove on that iron fist to show that they're there to just build partnership. But when you really look at it, one of the biggest components of community policing, they say it's collective efficacy and community safety partnerships, right? And what is collective efficacy, right? I have asked so many people, and I've read, a handful of reports about it. And really, it's when one of my friends was really like, okay, let me tell you who really uses the idea and the theories of collective efficacy. And those are people that are studying criminology. It's a big, big theory in criminology, because collective efficacy is basically saying, like, what does it take for neighbors to come out? And it sounds like good on the surface to come out and, help each other and to intervene when something's going on, and to feel connected to the community, right? And so at first you're like, of course, everybody wants collective efficacy. Tons of people have collective efficacy. Everybody wants to feel like they're a part of their community. Well, LAPD commissioned a few studies on collective efficacy through a private consultant named Justice, Security, and Strategies. And they studied collective efficacy in Miami-Dade, right? And they said through their studies that people who own homes, are male, have access to higher education, are not on general relief, have greater collective efficacy. Because people who are renters on general relief are young, are not men, tend to just be kind of fly by night, you know, come in and out of the community, don't have a permanent standing or stakehold in the community, so they have less collective efficacy. So if that is the foundation of community policing, and LAPD goes on in this handbook and talks about victim-centered victim-focused policing, who are the victims? Who are the stakeholders? Who are the people they're trying to protect, right? So that's, and what's so interesting is they kind of just lay that out because they want to increase collective efficacy by letting the stakeholders know that they'll show up if there's a problem, right? And I think this is all very familiar because we all very much know this is how they operate. So then we have the Community Safety Partnership. There's some folks from UCLA that are on the call as well and who are familiar with community safety partnerships, where basically LAPD basically does a lot of community outreach to stakeholders in the community. And we kind of went through that. They help with youth programs. They participate in something called Safe Passage, where they show up where kids are going to school and watch them go to school, which was really interesting. And maybe Hamid will touch on this, and we're going to have a conversation about stops. But there are quite a bit of stops of youth that are under 15 years of age, and so many stops that they actually show up in the report that the OIG just released last Friday on stops. So there's such a significant amount of stops of children age 14 that it actually got included in the OIG's audit of stops. And so, yeah, so that's how they build this community safety partnership, right? And so we see it, so when we look at community policing, as much as it tries to sound like it's something that is about partnership, about building, we really know who they're trying to build with, and we know how they're actually kind of setting up our youth to not only to kind of be a part of the system in themselves, to get integrated into it, or for them to be able to collect information on them. So I'm going to stop right there. And I want to see if folks have any questions, or if they have any kind of comments about offender-based policing, about location-based policing, or about community policing in their own experiences, because what we're trying to do is, there's a lot of jargon. Like, I didn't even get into, with the community policing, talk about crime prevention through environmental design. So there's a lot in there, but I kind of wanted to open it up to see if folks have any of their own experiences or thoughts, because what we're trying to do is build an outreach tool to start making people aware of how LAPD is packaging themselves now. And if you just want, you can just raise your hand if you feel like it, or if you want to put it. Oh, I see one, Victoria.
Give me 1 second. Go ahead, Victoria. Unmute.
Hi everyone. Thank you, Jamie. Like, I feel like I've heard you talk about this numerous times now, and I'm finally like piecing it together finally, because it's just a lot of information. But I guess I just wanted to add, like, just how insidious it is. And I just read a report from the NIH that mapped out LA County using LAPD data to find, like, they're now saying like cold and hot spots for like child abuse and neglect. And so what they do is, like, they're compiling child abuse data, birth data. They're just compiling all these risks and mapping it onto hot and cold spots in the LA City map. And you obviously know where the hot spots are. And they're basically arguing for more efforts to go into these areas of LA County. So even within COVID, we're seeing this mapping, this continuous mapping and overlay from criminologists in the academy, as well as through the police force. So I just wanted to highlight that. I can see if I can find that information too, but it's definitely occurring more so in COVID as well.
And I'm wondering, Victoria, if I can keep you for another second, is that when they say efforts, what are they trying to define the efforts be? Like, are they saying we need to bring resources in, people need wraparound resources, people need like shelter jobs, or are they like saying that we need to intervene and like remove children?
Yeah, so it was kind of a mix from what I remember. It was saying, yes, we need services, but the services and how it was framed is also tied to more surveillance. So it's like, we really need to be paying attention to these well, they have like 17 different categories of like hot spots and cold spots. So they have like persistent hotspots, new hotspots, consistent hotspot. It's so weird the way that they tried to map it. But so basically, yeah, they were like, yes, these places need more services, but they were also tying it into more surveillance. So these are high risk and we need to keep an eye on these hotspots through COVID. And so whenever I see that, it's very much like the child welfare system to me, where all of the services are always tied to surveillance and policing. It's not like, oh, we're going to give you guys money, or we're going to, help you through these different community organizations. It's always tied to more surveillance through the state, through the child welfare system. So it seemed like that kind of framing. I'll have to revisit it, but yeah.
Yeah, send it our ways. It's so interesting, the rabbit hole of data and how the manipulation of data can really just, you go until you find what you're looking for. You don't need the data to tell you anything. Today, they were having a conversation with the police commission, and they were literally like, well, we got to interpret the data. We got to lay the data over other data, because I know that it looks like there's a disparate impact of stops on the Black community. But if we overlay the data and really find out why they stopped, we'll realize that the data is really accurate, and just in saying that it wasn't really because it's disparate, but it's just because that data really solved crimes. And it was almost like data over data over data till you find the answer that you want. But I think what's really interesting, and we talked about this, and cool, we have another question, is that, and I believe, Hamid, you had even said it, it's like the perpetual criminalization of people. So when you constantly have these maps that are saying this is a hot spot, this is a criminal, this is a high crime spot, constantly neighborhoods are just being seen as criminal, and forever needing to have enforcement there, watching them, surveilling them, and being present. And then who's
Rick,
next?
Rick, go ahead if you want to unmute yourself. Go ahead and try it.
Hi, yes. Once again, like I said, I just relocated from Phoenix, Arizona. And so one of the questions I had was, you mentioned quite a few projects, and I'm wondering where is the funding coming from to actually finance some of these projects that the LAPD is actually implementing into the communities. Do you have any idea?
Yeah, so we actually have another working group for folks who are really kind of, into numbers. We have another working group that's actually looking at the surveillance budget. So LAPD, we know, and what's become like kind of general knowledge in LA, gets about 54% of the city's unrestricted budget, right? The general funds, out of the general funds. And but that's not it, right? And that's like $3 billion, close to, is it close to $3 billion? Correct me if I'm wrong.
The total is 3 billion. It's about 1.7, the 54%.
Yeah. So on top of those monies, they also get private funding from like the Police Foundation, often raises money to donate to LAPD, whether they donate stuff in equipment or they donate stuff in actual funds. And then LAPD also gets money from like grants from the National Institute of Justice, from the Bureau of Justice Assistance, from the various federal grants. And then oftentimes LAPD is getting money from other locations within the city budget. For example, we found a memorandum of agreement between the housing department, where they bought closed circuit television cameras for for various public housing units. And instead of LAPD buying the cameras and putting it up and coming out of LAPD's budget, it came out of the housing budget, but LAPD had full access and control over the cameras and the data. So it's like the housing budget paid for it, but LAPD ended up procuring it and using it and controlling it to the fullest. So there's several locations where LAPD is getting funding, but even that they're keeping confusing. Like we've in this group that meets, and they meet every Sunday at 4. So if you're interested in learning more about LAPD surveillance budget, email stoplapdspying@gmail so that we can contact you and help loop you into that working group. But not only has that surveillance budget over the last 10 years been exponentially growing, but it's really kind of looking at how carcerality starts to come out of like prisons, but into like neighborhoods where surveillance technology, and just like Victoria was talking, starts to become an ever-present part of our lives, so that we are always in constant constant watch. So so we're definitely looking at that budget. We're in a fight with them right now because they can't even produce their base budget right now. They can't even tell us what like the base budget was from last year, that they want to ask for more. And so look out for this as well, because in November, at the end of November, they're going to be releasing their next budget for next year. So they're going to be, and it's not even their base budget, like this is our budget, this is what we had last year, and this is going to be our new budget. They basically release, this is why we want more money. So that's basically what they release, is like, this is our, what is it, like almost like a proof of concept, like this is what we plan on buying, why we need to buy it, and why we need more money from you. So that's going to be coming out in November. So look out to our social media, and we'll be doing a call out to get people mobilized and aware and ready to respond to that.
Right.
The other piece is also, Rick, just real quickly, is the federal government, besides the Department of Justice funding, is the money coming from Department of Homeland Security through FEMA. So there are several streams. For example, since 2003, the LA Long Beach area has received close to about $1.5 billion from the Urban Area Security Initiative, which is just a grant, which is just they keep on giving. And some of that grant money, there was a whole US Senate report that had come out where some of this grant money was being spent on conferences that were holding training for cops that how to fight back a zombie apocalypse, where the entrance fee to register was $1,500. So there's a whole lot of money that is going on some really odd and mysterious activities.
Snow shit. Crazy.
Yep.
So any other, thank you, Rick. That was a really good question, and it really helped us to talk about some other action that we have going on as far as our as looking at that budget, because we definitely need to build a base of people who want to be looking at that budget with us and getting ready to mobilize, because you know, starting next year, budget is going to be on everybody's mind, if it's not already, considering how many people's jobs are on the line through the city as well, you know, combining with people who have lost their jobs right now. So like I said, with data-informed community-focused policing, we got 3 sections the working group is looking at: offender-based, location-based, and community policing. So we're trying to break it down because there's so much within it but we want it to start being something that people can just identify and see when they walk out the door and be able to interpret that. So any other questions or thoughts around that programming, and any kind of suggestions to the working group? Like I said, this working group meets the 3rd Monday of the month. So if you're interested, just hit up stoplapdspying@gmail.com. And we'll talk and try to loop you in. But any other thoughts about how we would like to, how people would like to receive information like this, or how it would be good for the community to receive it?
Hey everyone, it's me, Chella. I think we're doing pretty good with the zines. I just love the zines that we're doing. And I hope that we continue to make zines and make it palatable for because I know that for me, I get lost in the jargon, real talk. And so making it more accessible for folks. Not saying that that folks are dumb. It just, breaking it down with what the brother asked about their funding, making little cartoons about that, making little, zines about everything that you named. But yeah, I love the zines that we already have, and I hope we continue to create more zines. Muting.
Thank you, Chella. Do you want to explain what we're looking at, Hamid?
Oh, this is a zine, one example of a zine that it's on our website, stoplapdspying.org, that was developed by, in partnership with, let me just open it up, online zine. It's both printable version and online as well. And because of technology, our zine 3 has been delayed, but we're back in techno mode. So this was created by Baby Anarchist, one of our partner organizations, and in collaboration with the Palestinian Youth Movement, Youth Justice Coalition, Gender Justice LA. And it's about the war on youth. So it's about storytelling about, so how the youth are being impacted, what is the history of youth organizing and the resistance that the youth have built and fought back. And how COVID is impacting, how the national security police state is impacting, how surveillance is impacting the youth, how increasingly the impact of youth through ICE detention centers, but also how youth are being now framed as a threat to national security, where language is being used around extremism and violent extremism and radicalization. So this was Zine 2 that was released a couple months ago. And so it's on the website, so feel free. So the idea is to, and thank you, Chella, for lifting that. Idea is to tell the story, but also not just through a bullet point as well, but to create space where folks are able to, just read it as a story as well. So yeah.
And then we had another question as to the sense of whether police departments in other parts of California, like San Francisco PD, are also engaging in these tactics on the same scale. And I would say yes. Data-driven policing is definitely becoming part and parcel of all types of domestic law enforcement. And I say this because everybody's kind of moving in this kind of data mining, behavioral surveillance mode where they're watching your behavior, they're assuming if it's, suspicious or not, they're collecting data on you, and then they're analyzing that data. And that's basically because the Suspicious Activity Reporting Initiative, which this coalition initially came together to dismantle, was started in 2008 nationwide. So all police departments are engaged in behavioral surveillance and data mining, and suspicious activity reporting program essentially deemed like taking a photograph in public, using binoculars in public, drawing in public, asking a business its hours of operation as being suspicious, and they could open up a secret file on you, and that file would go to the Major Crimes Division of LAPD or your police department, however they vet that, and then it would get sent to a fusion center. And I had mentioned fusion centers earlier. They're like the little data and analytics centers where information just gets sent, right? And we were talking about how they're per area and per area and per bureau, and then there's also nationwide, right? So these fusion centers share this information, like these suspicious activity reports. So in 2008, Suspicious Activity Reporting Initiative is a nationwide thing that everybody's partnering in. The information sharing environment of that culture and setting up those institutions to actually exchange information with each other came about because of the Intelligence Reform Terrorism Prevention Act of 2004, which basically started the culture of wanting all departments to share information that way. So, so I would say, yes, it's a matter of just unearthing what your department is actually doing and how they are modernizing. And honestly, looking at their surveillance technology or information technology budget will really shed a lot of light on how they're moving in regards to surveillance. So any other thoughts? And then I thought I'd maybe see if Lauren's interested. I have a slideshow, Lauren, of all of our maps. And want to talk about what you're showing?
I was just showing the architecture surveillance. So no, it was, sorry if it distracted.
No, it's
you.
okay. I was just about to screen share, so I wasn't sure what you were doing.
Cool, it's all good.
Did you want to show it so that you can?
No, it's all good. I'll just
no, you had it up. Have it up and then let folks know what they were looking at, so that it doesn't just come up and then disappear.
Oh, this is this is an older version, but because we haven't been able to update it, so if people are interested, and I'll post the link to it too. This is the architectural surveillance, LAPDs, at least what we know. It's missing a few things like facial recognition and all, but goes into some details like what are the fusion centers, the Joint Terrorism Task Force, the suspicious activity reporting program that Jamie was talking about, the see something, say something, LAPD's intelligence gathering guidelines where they can place informants and also can go into your social media by taking on fake identities and fictitious personas, predictive policing, all the different tools, trapwires, Stingray, DRTs, license plate readers, high definition camera, body cameras, drones. And this memo as well is really interesting, which really identifies people who are doing anti-gentrification work as anarchist extremists. So this is a memo from the Department of Homeland Security. And then how vast is, and this is going back, this report was from 2002, actually, I mean 2011. So this has quite a bit of information, and I'll just post the link on chat. So thank you, Jamie.
No, thank you. Okay, cool. So so data-informed community-focused policing, location-based, person-based, and that touch of community policing to make you think that it's something nice. But we'll keep coming back to it. And like I said, we're in the process of getting our pop ed out there. And like Hamid showed you, we have a lot of nice, like the architecture of surveillance really helps to break down all the different types of surveillance equipment. And then like Chella mentioned, the zines. And so we're kind of getting all our thoughts together and figuring out how we want to present it so that everybody can kind of see it themselves real quick. So I have another slideshow that I wanted to show folks, and I'm just going to talk a little bit, and then I'm going to pass it over to, I don't know if Lauren, if you're interested in talking about the maps, but this is just the map slideshow that we normally use. I just have a couple examples to show people of what the Predpol map looks like and the laser zone map, and then the rest of it is what you've created. Are you down to talk about him a little bit?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, so I'm just going to tell folks where they're from, and then I'll pass it over to you. So remember when I spoke earlier, folks, about where this kind of collective came from and how we're now fighting data-informed community-focused policing, but before we were fighting Operation Laser. Well, these are the maps that we got through our public records requests. So as you can see, these are laser zones, and they're like black rectangular box. And there's one up here, another black rectangular boxes. So these are the laser zones. These were the hot spots that they were looking at. But they also had micro hotspots, which were little anchor points within the laser zones or by the laser zones or somewhere completely different. And they would have micro hotspots called anchor points. Now they're calling them the neighborhood engagement areas, which we talked about earlier. But before they were called anchor points. Another location-based policing program they had was Predpol. And this was actually the mission sheets that LAPD would get. And these little dots were basically, and the squares were 500 by 500 square foot areas. And this is where they would go after people and claim that crime was happening in these particular areas. So we got these also through a public records request. And then Lauren has led the group that's helped to actually map all these. So I'll pass it to you, Lauren. And then just tell me when to go ahead.
Okay, sure. Yeah, so as Jamie mentioned, through the Public Records Act request, we got a host of maps from the Operation Laser program, which Jamie mentioned earlier was dismantled, I guess in 2018. And then also the predictive policing program, which was effectively dismantled at LAPD in April 2020. And so what our mapping group as part of kind of the larger land and policing working group has been working on is kind of mapping out where these maps were, even though these laser and Predpol have been dismantled. We see a lot of the same language in terms of the 500 by 500 square foot micro hotspots and crime attractors and different language coming up again in the data-driven handbook. And so we're really trying to understand what the harm is of these programs in order to kind of undermine location-based policing strategies and kind of this hotspot mapping that's really just further criminalizing communities of color. And so if we started by mapping 77th Division or area, which is one of the areas in LAPD. So if you want to go to the next slide, Jamie. So these are the anchor points. So in the laser program, there's two components to the location-based policing program. So there's the anchor points, which are individual addresses or intersections, which are kind of identified as crime attractors. And so what we did looking through the data or the Public Records Act request was map where these are to get a better sense of where they're located. And this one kind of at the intersection of Slauson and Crenshaw is right on the Crenshaw corridor where they're kind of building the metro line, but also is where Nipsey Hussle's store is. And so that's something that we have been looking at in terms of how policing and harm has been brought to those areas under the guise of these anchor points. We also mapped the laser zones. So laser zones are kind of a broader area, kind of denoted by the squares or the polygons in the area. And we were interested in seeing where the laser zones kept occurring. And so if you can see the areas that are darker blue, that shows where laser zones kept coming up again and again. The zones would stay constant for about 9 months, but there's areas that were chronically targeted over and over again as laser zones. And that Crenshaw corridor, where Jamie's arrow was just there, yeah, that's kind of where the metro line is coming in, and it's an area that's ripe for gentrification. So one thing that we're doing in our working group is talking to different folks who are involved in housing organizations and concerned with gentrification to kind of look at the links between some of these location-based policing programs and gentrification in these areas. Move the next one. And so kind of speaking on that, one thing that we did was we overlaid the laser zones on different maps. This one is the LA Index of Displacement Pressure, which was created by the city. They were, I don't know if you want to kind of tell the story of this, Jamie, but from my understanding, housing rights groups and folks who are involved in kind of the right to counsel movement pressured the city to create this index to take a look at what areas were kind of had the highest pressure of displacement. And so what we see is that the legend is kind of cut off on the bottom, but the darker areas are, highest in terms of their level of displacement. And I think that it was measured in terms of rent, vacancies, turnover, and some other things like that.
Next one.
Yeah.
Okay.
We also kind of looked at arrests. This one doesn't have the laser zones overlaid, but you can see kind of where the red areas are. There were more arrests in those locations, and to the east of 77th area, you can kind of see darker red. And so there were a lot more arrests in those areas, which correlate to where the hot spots were. They're just not depicted on this map, but yeah. We also looked at kind of how the hotspots correlated with drug possession charges. And you can kind of see that, you know, between 2016 and 2019, a lot of the charges and the stops kind of fall within these laser zones. So, you know, our analysis is kind of that, you know, police are, you know, more likely to be patrolling and in these areas, and they end up catching a lot more people, and it causes, you know, further harm to the community. And then you want to go to the next one. So we also,
I'll go back.
Yeah.
So you can say what it is.
We also mapped Central Division. So this is kind of the area around our home near LA Can in Skid Row in downtown LA. And so what we mapped for Central Division and what we're looking at are the anchor points, which are again part of the laser program that was dismantled earlier this year. And we've also been able to map the predictive policing hotspots that we received, which were part of that. Oh, sorry, I messed that up. The laser program, which was dismantled a few years ago, and then the predictive policing hotspots, which was, which the program was dismantled this year. So if you want to go to the next slide, Jamie. So we were looking at these anchor points, part of the laser program in Central Division. And something that we noticed is a lot of them coincided with upcoming developments, as well as SROs, which were kind of being threatened. I don't know if you want to say anything about specific anchor points. We're doing research right now on different anchor points. And so
yeah, so this area is like Spring Street and 5th is an SRO here. 451 South Main Street is the Rosalind Lofts, I believe, that used to be the Frontier Hotel. Down here on 5th and San Pedro, there's a lot of SRO housing that's just in this area here. On Broadway and 7th, there's been 7-Elevens shut down. A lot of gentrifiers have like demanded more foot patrol in this area and have demanded more cameras because they claim there's too many houseless people there. Down here on Maple and 7th, they're actually building a luxury loft here. And let's see, 6th and Los Angeles Street here. This is actually like the divide right here. This is like the divide between Skid Row and what was Skid Row, and this is the developing downtown up here. And 6th Street and Gladys right here, this is Gladys Park, but this is also where LA Can is at, Los Angeles Community Action Network, which is our parent organization, where our office is at. So we're down right here.
do you want to go to the next one?
Sure.
Oh, yeah. And then, so these were the predictive policing hotspots for 2015. So when we had made the request, we had asked for all of the predictive policing hotspots in Central Division, but we only received 6 months in 2015 and 6 months in 2018. But what you can see where Jamie's cursor is kind of pointed is this kind of line and divide, which was kind of surprising when we were first looking and analyzing this. It's not something we expected. The area that doesn't have any of the hot spots is, you know, basically kind of that central historic core area, and also where Skid Row is. And so we were surprised to see that there were no predictive policing hotspots in Skid Row, but kind of the analysis that the group came up with is just that, you know, it's kind of quarantining and serving as like a digital red line and kind of a noose around Skid Row. And so that was something that was interesting that came out of the data. But same as the laser zones, like where it's the darkest is where the hotspots keep occurring. And so it kind of seems like the hotspots are most prevalent in areas that are being actively developed and gentrified and are in kind of the business improvement districts. Yeah, this is just what we had from June 2018, but you can kind of still see that middle area where Skid Row is doesn't have any hotspots.
And these are the anchor points
Yeah.
again.
Yeah.
And the anchor points with the hotspots.
Mhm.
So this just showing how the anchor points that we were speaking about before are in the red, and then how they kind of correlate with the hotspots. So it's like the areas that are not covered by the hotspots are covered by the anchor points. So the programs did, in a sense, work in conjunction. So, so I don't know if you do want to talk about what we're doing in that group a little bit, Lauren, or?
Sure. So we are continuing to kind of map out the laser zones and the Predpol hotspots and kind of overlay them on different data that we have from some of the housing partners and other folks, just to kind of get an adequate sense of, you know, what the harm was and kind of the connection between land, policing, and gentrification. So that's kind of an ongoing project. And so the first Monday of every month is the land and policing working group. And so if you're interested in kind of analyzing some of the maps or kind of talking about kind of the connections between policing, surveillance, and gentrification, we'd love to have you.
Yeah. So yeah, so just if you're interested, stop lapdspying at gmail.com. So yeah, so this is how we're breaking up and how we are tackling data-driven policing. So because there's a lot of components to it, and why it's so important for us to kind of do this work around the maps when in the land and policing group, where we're looking at the actual maps that we were able to obtain through the public records request. The reason why we're doing that is because when the police commission ended laser and ended Predpol, those two predictive policing programs, they didn't care to go back and look to see what harm happened, because they knew that there were violations of people's rights. They knew that the programs were inappropriate, like were not even being run like uniformly, and data was just being collected on random people. They were policing wherever they wanted to police, making it seem like they had some kind of scientific program running, but they didn't care to look at what the repercussions were. So we definitely want to look at the repercussions, but then we're also seeing this other effect, that how this mapping technologies is really like this ever-present criminalization, but cutting up of community, and how that partners with real estate developers, right? How do police actually partner directly with real estate developers? So that's the first Monday. The third Monday, we're tackling the data-informed community-focused policing. So please drop a line if you're interested in kind of helping us move that along. It's a lot of work. It's a lot of learning, a lot of studying, but it gives us kind of like a base where we can keep building and growing with folks so that we can actually, stop data-informed, data-driven policing and show it for the facade it is, because it's trying to hide behind objectivity and science. So I wanted to see if anybody had any questions around the location, around the maps, and around the kind of work that we're doing with looking at land and policing before we transition into the next, our next topic. But does anybody have any questions about the maps that they were seeing? Any kind of thoughts about the maps they were seeing? And don't be shy. This is how we all learn. And how we all kind of build power.
I have a question.
Sure.
Okay. So for looking at the downtown maps for the hotspots, do you know like what the data that they go by? Like, is it like complaints that you formally file with police? You know, or through the I think it's 211 or 311. So yeah, because sorry, just like cops are more available in those areas and to people who live in those areas. So I wonder is like even their presence on social media, you know, so how do they determine like how they're quantifying, you know, what makes it how they determine it's a hotspot?
Did you want to answer that one, Lauren, or do you want?
You can take that one.
Okay, so so for the maps that you were seeing of the Predpol hotspots around Central Division, that quarantined Skid Row, was that the one that you were asking about, Ari?
Yes.
Okay,
And how
so
it's really different from Skid Row.
yeah, so those ones, how it was kind of coming around and the dark circles were coming around Skid Row and Skid Row looked blank. Those ones were from the predictive policing program called Predpol. And Predpol, they claimed they were using it for property crime and possibly violent crime, but they weren't telling us exactly what data they were using, and we were trying to get it from them, but they were being very resistant, and primarily because it's a private company, so there's some amount of privacy or inability for us to get information from a private company like that that exists legally. But Predpol is predominantly for property crime, so theft from car, burglary from car, car theft. So really, it's for property crimes. But what we were finding when we finally got the OIG to audit it is that that Predpol was being kind of used however they wanted to. And so was Laser. Like they were just adding up crimes from whatever they said fit for the department. So if the department was having more property crimes, then they would run the property crimes. If the department was having more, you know, gun violence, then they would run gun violence. So it was really just being kind of run according to the needs of the division that it was being run in.
Got it. Thank you.
We
And
have
Ari,
a question.
Oh, one more thing. And Ari, it would be great to talk to you a little bit about the different anchor points, you know, around 7th and Maple and 5th and San Pedro, because I think you would know a lot about it just because you spent so much time organizing down in Central, in that area.
So Rick has a
Yeah,
question.
Jamie, we'll talk.
Rick, you want to just unmute and go ahead and ask the question or comment that you had? Oh, I think you may have to unmute again. Sorry for that. Yes, that's good.
Well, the question I had, I think you've read the question, but it was, you know, I'm an older male and I kind of remember similar activity that was going on in the 70s and the 80s, which eventually the end result led to mass incarceration. Are we seeing similar activity? I mean, has anybody actually studied and see if that is maybe the motive that we're seeing and the end result, another wave of mass incarceration?
Mm-hmm.
Did you want to answer that, Hamid? Here, I saw you nodding.
Yeah, I mean, and I think this is such a critical question, Rick. I think what we are seeing is different ways that incarceration is happening. And in that, where because of this whole facade and of pseudoscience and the veneer of science, so one of the layers is that now policing is being masked with the same intent and same outcome. So let's just say that too, although there's been a big fight where you know, releasing folks with low-level crimes and Proposition 47 and various other things have been out there. So, and then also legislatively, you know, things have changed where, you know, things around mandatory minimums are being challenged, where things around, you know, that whole disparate sentencing laws from between powder cocaine and crack cocaine. So during Obama's presidency, some of those things were changed as well. But I think what is happening is that concurrently, while that is being done, the ways that people are being incarcerated, or I should say the carceral state, is expanding on many different levels. So one thing would be that you may not be physically, let's say, in a cage or being incarcerated, but you may be now this new fashion, I would say, of ankle monitors or electronic monitoring. So you may be released, but you're now bound with that electronic monitoring, which makes it even more insidious because that becomes even a more deeper surveillance device to go after your family as well, right? So gathering information. So in a sense, I would say, and I'd love to hear other folks on the call as well, as what their thoughts are, that the outcome and the intent to continue to incarcerate, continue to harm, continue to put people in cages of certain communities, Black, Brown, Indigenous, you know, immigrant, trans, queer, so those communities that have been traditionally impacted, that on the face of it, you know, there may be that there are releases happening and other rights are being used too. But conversely, and I would even say that there is now more in the increasing evidence and body of research of where people are saying that what we saw, especially amongst youth, about school to prison pipeline, that as a result of surveillance and intelligence gathering and artificial intelligence and predictive analytics, we're moving into this age of womb to prison pipeline, where the families are being criminalized based on risk assessment tools. So it's already being almost like predetermined. It's almost like a pre-existing condition of criminality that is being assigned, that a child born to a particular family is going to become a criminal. So let's intervene early. So it is really a very hideous moment right now, especially with technology and science. And that's been our fight, because a lot of times surveillance is seen as this very superficial way around the invasion of privacy. No, it's much bigger than that, because privacy by itself is a very privileged space. It's really about the intent to cause harm and to continue on the same old things that were going on forever. So you're right, absolutely. And I think that the other folks, because this is such a key question for all of us who are involved in this fight. So, Andrew, do you have a comment as well? Go ahead.
I was just saying,
Mhm.
yeah, I was just saying that I think a lot of great scholars have shown how the same surveillance techniques are actually taken from the prison. So the ways in which the prison and the carceral system does correctional supervision, does detainment and racial profiling seem to massively overlap with just these policing techniques for people who have not even been charged with the crime yet. And so it already is treating people as if they're already guilty.
Jamie, can I ask a question from Victoria? So. Yeah. So Victoria, sorry not to put you on the spot like this, but I think I was just sharing these body of research and all of that, and your work has really been around child welfare and the criminalization of children. Over time, has there been comparatives done increasingly that as a result, especially in this age of high-tech policing and predictive analytics and risk assessments, do we see more and more younger children, or even families who are expecting a child, the criminalization of families kind of happening more? So yeah, well, I would love to hear your thoughts on that.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's interesting because, I look into surveillance in the child welfare system and policing the child welfare system. And a lot of the literature really is pro-surveillance, and they actually use the term surveillance constantly in terms of like preventative measures. So to prevent risk, to prevent children from being abused and neglected. It's like, how can you prevent them from being abused and neglected while they're still in the womb? And that's really their driving force. They're trying to prevent this from ever happening by surveilling women while they're still pregnant, from collaborating with hospitals to doing drug tests to removing babies right when they're born, while they're in the hospital doing hospital holds. So a lot of the data is actually pro-surveillance. There's a small body of literature that is anti-surveillance, and anti-data gathering, anti-predictive analysis, but it's really lacking. So I think one of the main contributors of this pro-surveillance is actually here in LA, Children's Data Network. They're through USC, and they work on a lot of risk assessment work, algorithm work in terms of preventing harm. They like to take this public health approach to child abuse and neglect. And so, Stop LAPD Spying just came out with a brief talking about this surveillance in the child welfare system, which mentioned some of this, but I would say they are one of the heavy hitters in LA County, and they're still doing this work. That goes with, this is mentioned in the report too, Project Aura, that a lot of people don't know about, was released, I can't remember when the exact date was, but this was a DCFS pilot that was piloting an algorithm, basically a risk assessment algorithm. And it would have something like a 95% false positive rate for Black youth. So had this project moved forward, it would have removed so many Black youth from the families based on this algorithm. And this algorithm, basically this equation, uses historical data, which is biased data, that's been collected generationally, puts it into basically an equation and tries to make a guess based off of basically nothing to see if youth are at risk. And so this is, a big part of moving forward, especially with Stop LAPD Spying, is to really get to the bottom of this, to see how child welfare even is a law enforcement agency and how it does play into this larger role of the carceral state, the prison industrial complex, the foster care industrial complex, all of these things. So it's really long-winded, but yeah, a lot of work to be done for sure in this area, but definitely not separate from the carceral state. Definitely a big factor in policing.
Great. And just building on that, I know Dejanay, and I'm so sorry, I'm just kind of asking folks and putting them on the spot because
No,
I think.
Mohammed, why don't you go ahead and close it out anyways, because you were going to have the conversation about the stop data. So I'm going to pass it to you anyways. So go ahead and finish up the meeting, because I was going to pass it to you anyways.
Oh, okay. Well, I'll get to the stop data because I think Rick's question is really such a critical question. And Dejanay, if you don't mind, if I can put you just ask you a question as well, because you've been doing such incredible research on the mass incarceration. So, what has been your understanding and your research, and then also, what are you seeing over time that since the time around mass incarceration, all the advocacy and organizing, are we into that moment in a sense where that brief lull, if you will, for fights around Proposition 47 and all, but now moving into that mass again, or sustaining that whole process of mass incarceration? I don't know, Dejanay, if you can hear me.
Hey, I can hear you. Yeah, what did you say about Prop 47?
No, just I'm just kind of building on Rick's question that that they remember the beginning stages of the efforts of mass incarceration. I mean, are we experiencing similar activity? And as we are in this now high-tech policing and how it's leading to more incarceration or not? So yeah.
Yes, definitely. I mean, from my research, just in trying to understand how poor people have worked to undo the penal organization of their lives. Incarceration, criminalization for being poor has always been the root, and it as connected to other systems, as I believe Victoria just mentioned, how these systems whether it be child welfare, whether it be various forms of social services, from cash assistance to, I don't know, the food line, have all been reaped with forms of criminalization. And so it is very pervasive in our sort of being poor, being not middle class, and even that is becoming more treacherous terrain for folks. But so the goal really becomes, how do we not just defund the police, but also target and sort of look at what the services exist and think about what it means to like have a more equitable social system, right? One that isn't dependent on forms of criminalization just for being or just for needing care or help. So I see, I mean, just on what's on the ballot this year, there are efforts right now to completely repeal the last 20, 30 years of organizing, which is really treacherous terrain. So yeah, I mean, that's what I've learned so much from y'all, LA Can, and just in community. But surveillance is the sort of the new frontier, as y'all have been laying out, in really making policing commonplace in a new way, especially with this science and technology piece. So I'm always interested in learning more. And so
Great. Thank you, Dejanay. And my last person I'm going to put on the spot is maybe Chella. Chella, you've been organizing in Skid Row, and I just had a question that how have you noticed or experienced folks with increasing use of ankle monitors? Or has that come across your sort of, understanding of how the community is being almost like in this carceral state?
Not just the use of ankle monitors, but I mean, I have seen a few, especially even in some of my neighbors, real talk, and some of my neighbors' guests, right? Just being honest, I think there's just, I mean, because of where I am, I live in Skid Row, right? Like, so it's like the highest population of policing. And there, I also think someone said it earlier about like the benefits, right? Or right now, because of the COVID, right? Folks are like going to GR a lot. And then they're finding out about like what they're doing with some of their monies. And then like they're criminalizing them and putting them on notice. And so like, there's just this thing of like, recording, and we've talked about this, recording what we do, right? Surveilling what we're using our benefits for. And yes, I said R because I get it myself. I get food stamps too. So like, even if you get it for weed, right, versus getting the $20 and going to go get, Tylenol versus weed, they're going to criminalize you, and they're going to be like, oh, okay, we see the kind of person you are. They're like, yo, I'm just trying to like do it naturally and get rid of my pain, So I think not just criminalization, but like the criminalization and the demonization of people that are at the bottom of the bottom. Yeah, I hope I answered your question.
Absolutely. So yeah, and thank you, Rick, for raising that, because I think that is we constantly need these reminders about that, how we are in this constant state of re-incarceration, and now with this veneer of science and pseudoscience and technology, it's become a high-tech policing form of a carceral state, which then leads me to, and I'll get to the data piece of that this piece that we've been working on, and Chella was kind of referring to, that this is we're kind of drawing out the stalker state, that how information moves within public sector and private sectors. So in a sense, if you are receiving general relief, if you are receiving food stamps, if you are receiving Section 8 vouchers or anything like that, all the eligibility standards and everything else, and questioning is so coercive, and it's so deeply in violation of your I mean, basically that's what the invasion of privacy comes down to. And that's how people are being traced and tracked and monitored, which then leads me to what Jamie was asking me to talk about very briefly, because I want to be mindful of time, that there were 2 reports that were released within the last 2 weeks, one today and one last week. And one report was the LAPD's annual biased policing report. And what is really remarkable about this is that for the last 10 years, so for example, this was a report that was released by the LAPD on complaints of biased policing or other types of allegations. So biased policing is also a term that has sanitized racial profiling. This was actually changed during Bill Bratton's time in 2007, 2008, where they officially changed the verbiage at LAPD from racial profiling to biased policing, which is really bullshit, because racial profiling is racial profiling. So, but this basically sanitizes that. But what's really interesting about these reports every year that we see, and I'll show you a record of the last 10 years, that while it talks about various complaints that have been filed against the LAPD, around alcohol-related, body-worn detention violation, discourtesy. When you look at this biased policing, where my cursor is, that in 2017, there were 514 allegations of biased policing from the community, and how many were sustained? 0. That they said, no, everybody's lying. In 2018, there were 494 reports or allegations of biased policing. How many were sustained? Meaning that they came out to be true in LAPD's own investigation? 0. So again, a community of liars. In 2019, there were 734 allegations of biased policing against the LAPD. How many were sustained? 0. So in a sense, that's what we are looking at, where these types of thing, and we just basically went back and looked at the last 10 years of this reporting, and this is what we saw. Going back to 2010, that since 2010 to 2019, over the period of 10 years, 4,862 allegations of biased policing have been charged against the LAPD. And what has happened? 0 has been sustained. So year after year after year after year after year, they're saying that no, this is y'all are basically lying, and this is nothing is going on. So this is not sustained. The other report I want to go to is that many a times, we think of. Hold on a second. Let me just find that piece again real quickly. Okay. I'm trying to get to this other report too. Yeah, here it is. So this was a report, and a lot of people think of stop and frisk as happening in New York, but LA has some of the highest numbers of stops anywhere in the country. So this is for the year 2019. And many folks may have read that news or heard about that news about the Metro Department and the gang enforcement detail were stopping people. There's a whole investigation going on that they were wrongfully placing people in gang databases, and on and on and on. So this report came out just so remember the one that 0 sustained that I was talking about, that people are saying that, look, I mean, that you're racially profiling me. Here's a report in which LAPD had 712,408 stops through the 12-month period. So now 712,000 people have been stopped by the LAPD, out of which 734 allegations are saying, which is like 0.0001%. It's not even up to that you can even count the zeros, but still they're saying you're lying. But what this report shows, what this does is that it creates this whole thing in a sense where when you look at the numbers, it's wild. It's just like it's which not just it's not really where we are surprised, but by race and gender. So in this case, what happened was, and let me just get to some of those numbers for everybody as well, that why were people stopped? Well, traffic violation was one. Okay, so broken tail light and all of that, let's figure that out. 81% or 518,000 were as a result of traffic violation. Reasonable suspicion, where they had some reasonable suspicion, was 16%. And other pieces, when you look at other parole and probation and everything else, you know, there are these numbers as well. Here's what we talk about, like what were the code violations again? And this is where the registration violations, parole, probation, which I'm still trying to figure out. And Jamie was explaining earlier that they know because of all the data that is being shared with everybody else. The point I'm trying to get to is that all of this information is going into the databases. All of this information is going into the information where people are absolutely being put into various databases, which will be used for risk assessment. So when people talk about Proposition 25 and the bail reform, you know, that's the argument that we are using, that it's the algorithm that is going to provide risk assessment to the judges, who are the most racist department anyways, to then assess whether this person is going to be a risk or not. So obviously when you have these numbers, so now remember the black population, so this is about the city of Los Angeles. The black population in the city of Los Angeles is a little over 9%. So by race, 27.3% who were stopped were identified as black. So now this is a 300% impact on the black community who's going there. So when people say as to why, and earlier, like, you know, what was the crime and how do they know, and what is in a sense, I think there was a question earlier, it's all of this data that is being put into these computers, which then spit out these algorithms as well, which spit out all these risk assessment tools. And these are the numbers that we are looking at. And white people were stopped 18% at the time. They're about a 30% population of the city. Latinx folks are like 46% of the total population, which pretty much meets, but this is where the disparity, the clear disparity is. So now when you have, in a sense, in the previous report that I showed you, that 64% of those complaints came from the black community, when you have 27% of folks who are making up out of 712,000, right? So which comes to about 200,000 people. Do you mean not even 500 can claim that there's racial profiling going on? So that's the kind of level of bullshit that we are dealing with about all this. So this is how these numbers are showing. I'm going to post a copy of this report, but so what we are asking folks to do is to join us if they're around, and of course we're going to be having an action and a press conference on the 10th of November outside the police headquarters in person, and we're going to taking it, and we're calling for an action over there as well for folks to come about. And more details would be coming, because what we are seeing is exactly that, how these numbers are then regurgitated into the computer, which then spits out exactly like, you know, where's the most criminal activity going on. So it feeds into the hotspots, it feeds into the bail piece, it feeds into the pre-trial release, it feeds into exactly what Chela was talking about, because all of this information is going to go into the stalker state. But it wouldn't show whether somebody was convicted or not. So now you're already being marked. So criminality is being assigned, if you will, for the lack of a better term, just by virtue of this high-tech policing and this kind of policing that is going on. So just want to stop there and see if folks have any comments, and I'll post both of these reports in chat as well. So any thoughts about that? Not surprising, but still, if there's any thoughts that folks have. Okay, I will stop there. Back to you, Jamie.
Okay, all right, so we're pretty much at the end of the meeting. So I want to thank everybody for hanging out with us for these last 2 hours. I know it's late. And I just want to remind folks that there's a couple things that came up. So for land and policing, if you're interested in getting involved in more of the mapping, making that connection between real estate developers and policing directly, we meet Mondays, first Monday of the month at 6 p.m. So email stoplapdspying@gmail.com if you're interested, and we'll get you oriented. If you wanted to help us out in getting, learning more about the data-informed community-focused policing, which entails the location-based, offender-based, and community policing components, and how we're getting that information out, strategizing our fight to dismantle that kind of policing, or all policing, I should say, hit us up. And then the other thing that came up is if you're interested in learning more about surveillance budget and getting ready for the next budget fight that's coming up, LAPD is going to be releasing their next budget at the end of November. So hit us up too, and we can help you get involved with the group that's prepping for that. And then lastly, we also have an LAPC fails group, and that basically is Los Angeles Police Commission fails. And so we're kind of a small watchdog group that goes to the police commission on Zoom every Tuesday at 9:30 in the morning and watches the meetings and gets the reports and everything from the commission. That gets released the Friday before the Tuesday that they actually have the commission meeting. So if you want to get looped into, being part of that team that does the watch over the commission and sees what latest reports are being released, hit us up too, because we got a lot of different things going on. And we'll keep coming back and reporting back, and definitely going to let folks know that zines and images are something that we really need to help kind of solidify these concepts. So if anybody else has any announcements about what their group is doing, things they want us to get involved in, just let's exchange information right now so we can unmute you if you have any things that you want to announce from your org or space.
I just have a quick announcement. And maybe Chella, I don't know if you're still on there. I was going to ask that our next Tuesday meeting is our first Tuesday of the month on the police state and gender and sexuality, and that's also election day as well. So Chella and I were just speaking earlier as to how do we then frame. Chella, any thoughts? And just to ask folks as well that maybe looking it through their lens of gender and sexuality and the current political landscape and the election.
I haven't thought about it yet. But we will have something rich for y'all to come talk about next week, I'm sure, with some amazing facilitating and guests. I think we'll have a few folks that I are down and aware of the political climate. Yeah, there you go. Muting.
Awesome. And then there's a question from Eugene. So go ahead and unmute yourself, Eugene.
Yeah, I don't necessarily have a question. You said that this was a time for making announcements. Is that correct? Yeah, so on November 8th, the kind of Los Angeles Tenants Union, but it's a NoHo chapter, and it's not the NoHo chapter in and of itself. It's a leftist organization out there that's planning on organizing a neighborhood march and rally in an effort to basically organize our communities regardless of who wins, because Biden is not necessarily, in fact, he isn't, ally of the working class, poor people of color. And so the event is on November 8th, and it starts on Haskell Avenue and Van Owen Street. And it's from 5 to 7 p.m. on a Sunday. So if anyone here is from the Valley and is looking to take part in helping organize your community and getting in touch with other organizations that are looking to do that work, again, November 8th on Haskell Avenue and Van Owen Street from 5 to 7 p.m. Feel free to come and join us. And if you have any questions, feel free to reach out and ask. Thank you.
Anybody else with any announcements? Okay. All right, well, I want to thank everybody for coming, and I definitely want to invite people to our next Tuesday's meeting, 6 p.m. It's a very intense day, so it's going to be super important that we're all holding space. And I think there's going to be a lot to talk about. Chella's already letting us know that they're going to have guests and they're going to have a great facilitation. So I invite you to, and that's usually our gender and sexuality working group or webinar. So please join us again next Tuesday, 6 p.m. Same Stop LAPD channel, same Stop LAPD time. So everyone have a safe night and we'll see you again real soon. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody. Bye.